This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Episode 695, my friends. Thanks for joining me. We're going to be talking about scoreapp.com today and basically scorecard marketing. How do you figure out who is your lead, who is not a lead through quizzes, basically. Now, how that works exactly, we will hear from Maxwell Nee. He's going to explain that to us. But certainly, who doesn't want the right leads? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? When people just walk in the door and they're ready to buy, but they're not there to buy what you're selling. Doesn't make any sense. So not all money is good money, as they like to say. So let's get Maxwell on the show, find out what Score App is and how do you use advanced quizzes to move your leads down the funnel. Maxwell, nice to see you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Christoph.
So scorecard marketing, kind of start us there. How does it work? What's the concept, and how do businesses use it?
Good question. So think of it as a assessment tool. So if you send out an assessment to a whole bunch of potential clients, depending on how they answer that, you will be able to determine who's cold, warm, or hot in terms of potentially working with you. And then you segment that list, and then you move into moving them through your sales process. So that's it in a nutshell. From the client's experience and the client side, they receive a personalized report. So they put in their information, they get a personalized report that gives them specific feedback on the topic of the quiz, which we found to convert and engage people really, really well. We're seeing conversion rates of scorecards and quizzes of about 20 to 40%, when typically it's about 10 to 15%.
What's interesting to me. So the way I kind of envision it a little bit is, you're using what you know about the perfect customer, right? And then based on what people answer, you kind of figure out who should move forward and who shouldn't. And it's kind of an interesting thing. Sometimes people want to do a phone call with me and whatever, and then they waste my time, and then they decide I'm not the perfect customer for one reason or another. Why did I have to do a phone call, right? Like, just figure out how to disqualify me way earlier and not waste my time. Does your system kind of take care of that problem, like the immense time waster of phone calls or things like that, or how does it fit into that?
That's exactly what it does. So think of it as like a weeding tool. It'll weed out everyone that's just isn't ready. They're not ready to work with you. They're not ready to make a decision. They're not ready to spend any money, and it'll tell you that information about them, which is great. So you can then nurture them on a different journey, and then it'll bring the hot, red hot, ready to go lead straight up to the top of the pile.
I think the key phrase I heard there too is, if they're not ready, you put them down a different nurture path, right? And I think sometimes people, when we're oversimplifying things, or maybe when we have too specific goals, right? So if my goal is to close sales this quarter, I might not be thinking about 4 quarters down the road, right? The other nurture path. But how do you figure out where in the funnel people are? And then, like, depending on what they say, you like push them down, getting an email every week or something like that, and then like check in again, like down the road, or how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So there's two main buckets, right? The first bucket is the top 3% of any market. So the top 3% of any market are ready to buy now. It's never more than that number. So that those are people that have identified they've got a problem, they're on the lookout, they've got the funds ready to go, or they've allocated the funds in their mind mentally, and they've got their credit card in their hand, essentially ready to buy a solution to solve their problem. One layer down is the next 7% of people. So these people is probably where the biggest bang for buck is in any business. So this additional 7% of your target audience, they want what you have to offer. They are ready to buy, to take some type of action, but they're just not ready to buy today. It could be tomorrow, could be next week, could be 4 months from now, could be 6 months from now, right? But they are the right person in the right place. It's just that the timing isn't right. Maybe the urgency hasn't bubbled up to where it needs to be just yet. So this particular audience is very interesting for a few reasons. It's interesting because it's twice the size of the first audience, like whoever's ready to buy now. And it's also very interesting because typically this audience, it's twice the size and they haven't decided who they're going to buy from yet, right? So the difficult thing about people who are ready to buy something is that they've typically decided who they're going to buy from, right? And then if someone new comes along at the last minute, thinking they could try to get them to convert to switch to another product, that's usually quite difficult. So think of it as like, you've made a decision to buy an iPhone when it's just come out last month, and then all of a sudden a salesperson's trying to get you to switch over to an Android, right? It doesn't really work like that. But if you're in the market for a smartphone in general and you haven't decided which one to buy yet, then that's when it's much easier for someone else to talk to you about that. So that's where scorecard really is magical. It helps you to bring the urgent buys up to the top, and then helps you to nurture and give more value to that extra 7%, so that you can get in front of them sooner to convert them when they're ready to buy.
Yeah, it's just like it's a little bit of a long game, right? I think in any business, and we need to remember that. But how does it? Next week, I believe we have Isabel Landreville from Sylvester on the show, and I'm sure we're going to touch on cultural sensitivities, biculturalism, those kind of things. I mean, she's an expert at that topic. And so when I hear you talk, I think it's great. I think it's the more um, the more we have the right conversations with the right people, the better, right? Or the right people coming down the funnel here. But how do these tools, how do they adjust? How do they keep track of cultural differences, right? So for example, I mean, I get it. I'm in marketing. I know all the sales tricks. So if a salesperson comes to me and they pull this stuff on me, I know what they're doing, but I know it also works on some people because they don't know what they're doing. How does it account for, like, some people might give different answers because just of their cultural background, whether they grew up in another country or they grew up in another part of our country. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, so this doesn't synthesize the data, it just extracts it for you, right? So that'll come down to the entrepreneur knowing their audience, knowing where their audience is from in terms of how they use the data, but it doesn't synthesize it for you. So that'll be up to the entrepreneur.
So they have to do that. And how do they do that? Like they get the data, and then how do they analyze it? Is that in the app, or what's the workflow typically?
Yeah, so it goes into a dashboard. So it goes into a dashboard, and you'll see, 20% of people answered question one this way, 30% of people answered this way, and it'll spread it all out for you in the dashboard and show you the average, the low, the high of people who achieved which result according to the assessment that you put out.
And then where do people typically get where do they typically get the quiz? Like, is it early on? Is it on the website, on their phone? How long does it take? Like, give us some details on that.
Yeah, so distribution of the quiz could be anywhere. It could be in your email signature, it could be in your email list, it could be in WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, social media. Ads is an obvious one. On your website is an obvious one. Anywhere there is traffic, you would want to have this because it's a conversion tool. Converts traffic into warm, qualified leads. So we have people that create a new scorecard quiz for each one of their YouTube videos. They do one video about happiness, and they create the happiness scorecard quiz. They create one video about purpose, then they create the purpose scorecard, and then they've got a video about unhappiness, and they've got the unhappiness scorecard. Because all of that traffic, they want to be capturing that data and converting those into leads.
What's your philosophy when it comes to AI? I'm a big fan of AI, especially as a co-pilot, never as an
Mm.
autopilot, so to speak. but like,
Mm.
what's your philosophy on that? I know you have AI built in, but like, is it like, how do you feel about the use of that?
Yeah, so let me share how we use AI, and then I'll show you, our philosophy, right? So, um, the way I describe it is that we use AI to enable users to do things faster. So, before we put AI into the platform, it would take someone about a day and a half to set up their scorecard. Now it could be done in less than 1 hour, right? Because the AI wizard will write your concepts. It'll basically write. We've structured it so it writes a marketing campaign for you. So it'll get some information out of you about who's your audience, your niche, what you're trying to achieve, and then it'll take that information and then write a marketing campaign for you. Exactly what a copywriter would have done for you, except that you don't need to pay a lot of money for a copywriter. So it does, 6 to 7 hours of copywriting for you in minutes. So, what does that mean? What does AI mean in general and in the future? The way I see it is that AI has done to, writing, reading, calculations. It's done to all those things. What the calculator has done to the abacus. So before the calculator was born, people were working out large sums using abacuses and using their fingers and drawing things out pieces of paper. But now you just press some buttons on a calculator and then it spits out the answer. So AI is the same thing. It's a tool that just saves you a lot of time.
But just like the calculator, you still kind of have to have a basic knowledge of math, right? You still have to know, like, oh, that's not correct, or like that's not the right answer. And I guess I did this the other day. It's been a few months, I guess, at the car dealership. And I asked AI, I said, okay, if we do this and this and this, what's the monthly payment or something like that? And I got
Mm,
the answer wrong. So everybody, of course, is rolling their eyes, but it's no different than doing it on a calculator and getting it wrong. You still have to know
mm.
that you didn't get it right and you have to do it again. So, but how do people know that whatever they just created is good copy or is a good flow? How do like what are the checks, or do they just have to know?
Uh, I don't think there is a way to know. Even if you're a copywriter, there's not a way to know whether or not your copywriting works until you just test it, right? So it's a rapid test scenario. And yeah, you're right. AI is only as good as the driver that's driving it, right? So think of it as like um the difference between an iPhone camera and a DSLR. DSLR has all the settings and stuff, and you got to adjust the focus and the aperture and the contrast. And the iPhone camera, you just point and click, right? So, but the quality of the photo will still come down to who's pointing the camera.
What's interesting to me about that discussion, anyways, is sometimes people say, "Well, do you have to announce or declare that you're using AI?" And somebody says, "Do you have to say you're using a keyboard or you're doing voice dictation?" Or I mean, only when it makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and she said, "Oh, I'm currently using voice dictation. So if like something doesn't make sense, that's probably why I'm running to another meeting or something." So like again, it's a good example because like in that context, it was good for me to know, right? But do I need to know that you use the WordPress SEO title generator for your first draft of a headline? Like, not really, right? I mean, I probably barely will see it anyways. Um, okay, what was the problem that the company was trying to solve when you guys first came up with the Score app? What's your story? I mean, where was the idea born?
Yeah. So we were trying to let me take a step back. So I had a business coaching business for about 5 years, and we went from zero to about 2 million bucks a year within the first less than 2 years. And a lot of people ask me, how do we do that, right? And the really, really crude, unmagical, pragmatic answer is just with a lot of leads and a lot of sales. So, I was always, always, always looking for an edge or looking for a cheaper way to generate leads. People interested in what I have to offer. What's a lead? It's someone that's put their hand up and have said, "Hey, Christoph, I'm interested in what you have to offer. Here's my permission for you to send me some more information, and here's my contact information. Right. So I needed 2 to 3 thousand of those in my business every single month to keep that revenue number where I wanted it. And scorecard marketing was one of the biggest needle movers to help me get to that $2,000-3,000 lead number per month.
Got it. So just kind of moved forward and kept growing. So let's talk about once you have people coming through. I mean, this is like the traditional example of, a company goes to a conference and they collect names and they collect emails and they collect, and that's basically
Mhm.
it, right? Maybe the title and the company. And then what? What are people going to do from there? And I know maybe you don't focus on that exactly, but once you spit out all this stuff in the dashboard, like what tips do you have for people to make the most use out of it? Because if you have 7,000 leads and nobody's going to do anything with them, it doesn't make any difference that you have seven. I mean, you might as well have no leads.
Yeah, I like the way you think. So yes, you're right. That really comes down to your product, right? If you're selling, uh, iPhone cases, $10, $20 iPhone cases, you probably just want to segment them into email marketing and email promotions, maybe a Black Friday sale that's, obviously coming up. But if you're in a high ticket space, you're selling something for one, five, $10,000, like what we were selling in our previous company, then you want to book people onto a call, right? So you might segment the list. So um, the top 10% of people that are really, really have urgency and wanting to solve this problem, you might want to book them on a call, that week.
Yeah. And I mean, what other strategies? Is that really the only thing to get people on a call, or do you see other people like what kind of nurture campaigns are working? It's very interesting to me. Like everybody always wants to hop on a call with me, like nonstop, and I'm like, just show me what the thing is. And then I swear yesterday somebody just booked me on a call, and then I canceled it. And then they
Mhm.
called me and they said, "Oh, I saw you canceled our call." I'm like, I don't even know who you are. That's not very cool. But like how do you what have you seen work? Like how do people use the information that comes out to really make that experience personalized, or is that not how it works necessarily?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So I'll give you an example, right? So let's say you filled out this quiz and you've scored somewhere like 7 out of 10. So I would probably call you or email you and say, "Hey, Christoph, thank you for filling out our assessment. I can see that you've scored 7 out of 10. If you have 2 minutes, I'd love to share with you, three things that you could do to go from 7 to a 10. And if you'd like some help to do that, we could talk about that as well. But if not, let me know, and then I'll just send you over, some relevant material to help you get from 7 to 10. So you can literally personalize every single interaction down to the specific measurement that the person's received from doing your quiz funnel.
I mean, I think personalization is so important, especially too. It's, how do you pass it along and how do you use it as you're moving forward? I mean, in the old days, you have, of course, Michael Scott on The Office, right? The little flip cards and color coded and whatever, talking to people. But it's so important to have the right experience for people to move them along. As you said, the numbers are relatively small, right? 3% of people are ready to buy, and then 7%, and you never know how many people from the bottom part move on up as well, obviously, because stuff changes and needs change. In the last few minutes here, tell me, like, what companies should use Score App? Like, how big do they have to be? I mean, one thing that I kept thinking about too, I'm like, okay, well, it's great to put it on my website, but if my website doesn't have any traffic, nobody's going to take a quiz, right? So, like, you still have to kind of drive people to there. So, I assume there's some level of this is how big your company has to be. This is how many, I mean, whatever. What's like the scenario? What's like the perfect customer that can get the most out of your product?
Yeah, so I don't have a perfect avatar for you because the client base is actually quite broad. So we have about 6,300 paying clients right now, all around the world in about more than 100 countries. And there's a free version that you could use to just get started. There's a version about $50, a version about $100, and a version about 130. And the client base is predominantly, coaches, consultants, service providers, online entrepreneurs, pretty much anyone that offers something that isn't a physical product, or isn't location centric. So, like a restaurant wouldn't really use it. A mechanic wouldn't really use it. Anyone that has something that could scale, through emails and phone calls gets the most out of it. So that could be an accountant, financial planner, a personal trainer. It could be any type of health, wealth, leadership, executive coach, consultant. A lot of engineering consultants use it as well. And actually, a lot of large HR companies use it as well. They use it as part of their recruitment process to narrow down candidates for recruitment. So it really is quite a broad base, and we've made it as easy as possible by having the free version that you could jump in there, get set up, get used to it, get some wins, and then upgrade to the paid version if you need to.
Yeah, actually, I've seen some of those things. One of my childhood friends back in Germany, when they hired for his company, they had like, "Have you done this? Yes. Have you done this? No. Sorry, really not a fit." Do you know what I mean? It's like, why
Yeah.
do you have to spend like 20 minutes reading a job description if it's literally those two things? If you don't have them, you can't do the job. Like no matter what, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting to and maybe that's oversimplified, but well, very interesting discussion. Thanks for joining me. Scoreapp.com, check that out to step up your lead generation and lead optimization, really lead scoring, I guess. Maxwell, thanks for making the time. I know it's late in Singapore, right? 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Still fairly early here, 9:30 west of Chicago. Nice to see you. Good luck, good continuous luck with the company, and we're out.
Beautiful. Thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your